hopefully you can just about make out the water of the River Wharfe glistening behind me, and if you can't see it, perhaps you can hear it rumbling away. In the summer, when the temperature's a good deal warmer than it is this evening, hundreds of people come to Ilkley to swim and to paddle in the River Wharfe. And partly for that reason, in some ways, this river has become an illustration of a bigger issue, because campaigners in this area are lobbying for the amount of sewage that's released into this river to be dramatically reduced, if not stopped. Water UK, which represents the water companies, insists all of this is done within strict rules, it's regulated and permitted. But campaigners who are worried about the extent to which this is happening say the rules need to change. Linking land and sea, crisscrossing the countryside, cutting through towns and cities. They're arteries of ecosystems, supporting life as a home and food source. But it's not just wildlife lurking below.
By the time I'd got out, I was draped in wipes, sanitary towels and unmentionables.
Channel 4 News has obtained data that hasn't been made public until now. The figures show for the first time how often untreated sewage is released into our rivers. In some places, it's hundreds of times a year and for thousands of hours. Would you swim in a river that's got a CSO in it?
Absolutely no way.
Would you let your dog swim in a river that's got a CSO in it?
There is no way I would let my dog go in a river that has a discharge of raw sewage into it.
This down here is a CSO, a combined sewer overflow. The vast majority of the time, they're meant to be doing this. Nothing. But when a serious amount of rain comes down, then they act as an emergency pressure release, stopping the sewers getting too full and backing up. But in some places, CSOs are being used a lot, releasing into the rivers a mix of rainwater and untreated sewage. That's condoms, sanitary towels, wet wipes, and human waste. You've been doing this for a long time.
Over 30 years, I've spent half my life in that river. Yeah.
Mark Barrow is an underwater cameraman.
Just round here, there's been freshwater mussel beds. They've now gone.
Last year, he learned in a fairly unpleasant way what was being released into the River Wharfe in West Yorkshire.
The river was low, it was clear, and then I hit this wall of what I assumed was silt. And it wasn't until I surfaced that I realised the CSO was discharging.
So you get out of the water and you literally have...
Yes. Everything. Yeah. Everything you can imagine was stuck to me.
Channel 4 News has obtained data under Freedom of Information laws for about a third of the CSOs on rivers in England and Wales. In all, they discharged into rivers more than 140,000 times in the most recent year the data covers. United Utilities, Severn Trent and Anglian Water have sewer overflows that were overflowing for more than 6,000 hours in 2018. Or put another way, they released a rainwater and sewage mix for 9 months of the year. With more storms more often, some fear things will only get worse. Plus, there's the capacity problem. Since our sewage system was built, the number of people and houses has kept on going up.
But now populations are much bigger, so we put a lot more into our sewers. We use a lot more water.
At Leeds University, Dr. Paul Kay knows a lot about CSOs. He's a water quality expert and is clear the pathogens released are a potential health risk. But he has some sympathy for the water companies. How have we got to a situation where we've got CSOs, it would seem for months of the year, letting sewage into our rivers?
I think it's similar to a lot of environmental problems in that it's not an easy problem to deal with. You know, it's difficult technically, it's very expensive, and we just kind of brush it under the carpet a bit until it becomes such a problem that we really do need to do something about it.
In London, that point has been reached. So they're building the super sewer, 15 miles long, it'll be big enough to capture and store almost all the rainwater and sewage that at the moment is going into the river. But it's an expensive fix for a problem that, by and large, isn't breaking any laws or rules. In Ilkley, famous for its moor, and a song about being underdressed for the conditions up here, we met Ben Roche from Yorkshire Water. He told me major building projects would mean higher water bills, so they're trying to find other fixes. Is the system that we've got at the moment good enough, in your view?
Well, I think there are two things. There's complying with the law and a change in expectation. I think we would ideally like to see surface water out of combined systems. What are the environmental techniques that we could do that means that we can avoid big-scale disruption to our customers?
Would you swim in a river that's got a CSO in it?
Well, I have swam in the River Wharf, or paddled actually, with my children, but I'm not the...
You let your children go in it?
Well, I've paddled in the River Wharf with my kids.
Back down the hill, about 100 metres from one of Ilkley's CSOs, we met Karen. She's part of a campaign to get this water declared safe enough to swim in, even though she told me there's no way she'd get in it at the moment. But with that status would come tighter water quality rules.
We will be the ones that end up paying, there's no doubt about it. But we can't carry on treating the environment like this. I suppose it's more the water industry's dirty little secret that this is happening.
The use of CSOs is legal and licensed by the Environment Agency. But with some overflowing so often, it adds up to months, not just the odd day. Some say we need to rethink and get a better balance between convenience and nature.
Well, earlier I spoke to Helen Wakeham, who is Deputy Director of Water Quality at the Environment Agency. I began by asking her that given the conditions building up at some of these outlets, was there a high level of anxiety at the agency about the overall state of the sewage overflows?
I wouldn't say an anxiety. We're certainly doing a lot more work on combined sewer overflows than we did. Prior to about 2015, we really reacted to reports from the public that there was a problem with combined sewer overflows. Since then, with the water industry, there's been huge investment in putting monitoring systems onto, well, more than half of our combined sewer overflows. And what that's telling us is which ones are a problem and which aren't. So they're designed to operate only in very wet weather to stop sewage from backing up into people's homes. What the monitoring is enabling us to do is to see those ones which are operating in dry weather. Once we know and we've got the evidence, we can start to work on those with the water companies, we can investigate, and we can make sure the water companies invest to put them right. So it's new, it's more proactive. What's actually happening is not that the problem's getting worse, but that we understand more about it, and that's enabling us to do something about it.
But in filming at the Wharf River, have we picked just a particularly bad one, or is this typical of what's going on? I mean, we're talking about a terrible stench, awful backup of stuff at the actual outflow, and a jamming up with appalling things like sanitary products, condoms, wet wipes, and all the rest of it. You know the problem.
And of course that absolutely shouldn't happen, and if there's a particular problem with a particular combined sewer overflow, we'll always investigate that. But I think what you're describing in terms of what you can see is a real indicator of why the problem isn't just about the water industry, it's about individual behaviours. If the sewer is full of wet wipes and fat, you know, the fatbergs that we've seen so much about in the press, there isn't room for the water. And so if that's happening, sewers are filling up and overflowing more rapidly. So there is something that individuals can do to stop that from happening, which is not to use the toilet as a bin.
But, I mean, putting it simply, why are there systems that are backing up to 9 months? I mean, how's this come about? 9 months is a terrible length of time, and it's a period in which, obviously, far more stuff is going out into rivers and beyond that out into the sea, and we can't afford that.
But that absolutely shouldn't happen, and there is the wherewithal within the water industry. And, as I said, there are things individuals can do to make sure that our sewerage network works better than it does at the moment.
If we were to offer you the sort of simple, plain person's test, are our rivers safe for people to swim in? We've talked to people who said they wouldn't even let their dogs swim in it.
We don't manage most of our rivers for swimming. We manage our rivers for amenity and for wildlife. Where we make the bathing water designation, and there's more than 400 of them in England, we work very hard to make sure that they meet the standard. So if we're going to have our rivers at that standard, and I think it's certainly something that we should consider and something that we should pursue, it will take a partnership between the water industry and communities to get it right. But having said it's a challenge, I think there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't pursue it.
Helen Wakeham speaking to me from the Environment Agency earlier. Well, we're joined now by Feargal Sharkey, former lead singer with the Undertones, who's become a very vocal critic of the various agencies overseeing the health of England's rivers. Well, what did you make, first of all, of the agency's response?
It is deeply and desperately inadequate. I'm truly genuinely shocked by what we've just watched. The Environment Agency have known about this issue for a very long time, primarily because the EU Commission first made an official complaint to the UK in 2003, and indeed the European Court of Justice issued a court order demanding that the UK stop it in 2012. It is, in reality, John, I'm afraid, another damning indictment of the inability of the Environment Agency to properly maintain and regulate the water industry at all overall. It's a catastrophe.
Why did you get involved in this?
For that very reason, I have a passion for fly fishing. I have a passion for chalk streams, of which there are only 225 on the entire planet. Most of those here in southern England, and most of those now, curiously, also damaged by the activities of the water industry and the over-abstraction of the water allowed by the Environment Agency. Again, an issue they've proved incompetent and unwilling to properly address.
A lot of people will be very surprised that there were legal processes by which you could put sewage, raw sewage into a river. What is surely so scandalous is that it's been allowed to happen illegally on such an enormous scale.
The issue is, and the court was very clear. According to the court, this should only ever happen in two, quote, exceptional circumstances. Is 400 times a day, which you've uncovered it is happening. I'm struggling to understand how 400 times a day could exceptionally incompetent, possibly, exceptionally complacent, possibly, exceptionally rare, definitely not.
Is the citizen complacent? I mean, how much of what is going into the rivers is partly the fault of you and me?
Well, I think we all are trusting by nature and trusting of the establishment. And when you have an organisation like the Environment Agency with a £1.4 billion a year budget, 10,500 people, we probably all assumed to have been doing the right thing for the last 30 years. It transpires that clearly at this point, I now think it's been demonstrated the leadership have neither the ability, the desire, the determination to address this problem.
The agency says they've spent billions since privatisation. How much more is needed?
Well, ironically enough, for example, the figure they quote is they're going to invest $5 billion for the next 5 years. When you scratch under the surface, that money's predominantly been spent in simply maintaining the status quo in normal operational maintenance and operating costs. It is not doing a thing to reduce that 140,000 figure to 100,000 to 50,000. It has no impact whatsoever. It's fake news.
Feargal Sharkey, thank you very much indeed for talking with us.
Thank you, sir.